It doesn't start with failure. It starts with a quiet voice that follows you everywhere. A whisper that says, "Not yet, not good enough, not quite there." And no matter what you achieve, no matter how far you climb, that voice never leaves. This is the exhaustion of never arriving, of running toward a finish line that keeps moving. Maybe you were the child who brought home a 95 and heard, "What happened to the other 5 points?" The one who learned that effort wasn't celebrated unless it was perfect, that love felt conditional, earning through grades, through being good, through never causing problems. You learned early that your value was tied to your performance, so you performed, constantly. By the time you were a teenager, you were already exhausted. You studied harder than anyone else. You said yes to everything. You built a resume that looked impressive on paper but felt hollow inside, because no matter what you accomplished, it never felt like enough. Now, as an adult, the pattern has only intensified. You achieve something significant, a promotion, a milestone, recognition, and instead of feeling proud, you feel nothing. Or worse, you feel like a fraud, like you fooled everyone into thinking you're competent, and it's only a matter of time before they realize the truth. So you keep pushing, keep working, keep trying to prove something that can never be proven, because the goal isn't success. The goal is finally feeling worthy, and that moment never comes. You've spent your entire life chasing a feeling of enough that stays just out of reach, and you're so tired, but you don't know how to stop. Psychologists call this chronic inadequacy, a persistent belief that you are fundamentally lacking, no matter what evidence suggests otherwise. But this isn't about humility or healthy self-improvement. This is a wound that distorts everything you see. Here's what really happens. This belief typically forms in childhood, during critical developmental windows when you're learning your worth. Maybe your parents were well-meaning but perfectionistic. Maybe love was expressed through criticism disguised as motivation. Maybe you had a sibling who excelled, and you internalized the message that you were always second best. Or maybe it was more subtle. Maybe no one said you weren't enough, but no one ever said you were either. You grew up in an environment where achievement was expected, not celebrated, where doing well was normal and only failure got attention. This creates what researchers call a conditional self-worth schema. Your brain learns to measure your value through external validation, grades, accomplishments, other people's approval. But here's the devastating part. External validation can never fill an internal void, because the problem isn't that you haven't achieved enough. The problem is that your nervous system was wired to believe that worthiness is something you earn, not something you are. Neuroscience shows us that people with chronic inadequacy often have hyperactive performance monitoring systems in their brain. The anterior cingulate cortex, the part that detects errors and mid-statures between expectations and reality, is constantly firing. You're always scanning for what's wrong, what's missing, what needs to be thick. And here's the cruelest irony. The more you achieve, the higher the bar becomes. You get the promotion, but now you're worried about the next level. You finish the project, but you're already thinking about what you should have done better. You receive praise, but you discount it. They're just being nice, they don't really mean it, they don't see the real you. This is called the hedonic treadmill of achievement. You're running faster and faster, but you're never actually moving forward, because the finish line isn't external, it's internal, and you've never given yourself permission to cross it. But here's what no one tells you about living this way. You become incapable of enjoying your own life, because when you never feel enough, nothing you do ever feels significant. You achieve something you worked months for, and within hours you've moved on. You receive recognition, and you feel uncomfortable, almost guilty. You reach a goal, and instead of celebrating, you immediately set the next one. You rob yourself of joy, of pride, of the simple satisfaction of saying, "I did that, and it was good." And relationships become complicated, because when you don't believe you're enough, you can't believe that people genuinely want you. Every friendship feels fragile. Every romantic relationship feels temporary. You're waiting for the moment they see through you, realize you're not as impressive as they thought, and leave. So you overcompensate. You work harder to be indispensable. You give more than you should. You try to prove your worth through usefulness, through being perfect, through never needing anything. But it never works, because you can't earn what you refuse to believe you deserve. And here's the part that breaks you. You start to resent yourself. You resent the voice that never shuts up, the one that critiques every word you say, every decision you make, every flaw you have. You're exhausted from your own internal prosecutor, but you don't know how to make it stop, because that voice has been with you so long you've started to believe it's protecting you. That if you stop being hard on yourself, you'll become lazy, mediocre, ordinary. But what if that voice isn't protecting you? What if it's slowly destroying you? What if the cost of never feeling enough is that you never get to actually live? You're so busy trying to prove yourself that you forget to be yourself. So focused on becoming worthy that you miss the truth. You already were. Here's the truth you've been running from. You will never achieve your way into feeling enough. Because enough isn't a destination, it's a decision. It's the radical choice to stop measuring your worth by what you produce and start recognizing it as something inherent. Not earned, not conditional, just there. So what does that actually look like? It starts with something uncomfortable, separating your identity from your achievements. You are not your resume. You are not your productivity. You are not the sum of your accomplishments or the measure of your output. Those things are what you do, not who you are. Try this practice. Name 3 things about yourself that have nothing to do with achievement. Not, I'm successful, or I'm hardworking. But things like, I'm curious, I'm gentle with animals, I laugh at stupid jokes, I notice small details, I care deeply about people. These qualities don't require performance. They don't need to be earned. They just exist. And they're just as valid, just as valuable as any accomplishment. Here's another shift. Practice good enough instead of perfect. This doesn't mean lowering your standards or becoming mediocre. It means recognizing that perfection is not only impossible, it's not even desirable, because perfectionism isn't about excellence, it's about fear. Fear that if you're not flawless, you'll be rejected. But real connection, real belonging, happens in imperfection. When you let people see you struggling, unsure, human, that's when they actually feel close to you. Perfection creates distance. Vulnerability creates intimacy. And this is crucial. Learn to receive without deflecting. When someone compliments you, instead of, oh, it was nothing, or anyone could have done it, try simply saying, thank you, I'm proud of it too. It will feel wrong, almost arrogant, but that discomfort is your nervous system recalibrating. You're teaching yourself that it's safe to take up space, that it's okay to be seen, that you don't have to earn the right to exist. You might also need to grieve, to mourn the years you spent proving yourself to people who were never going to be satisfied. The accomplishments you couldn't enjoy, the version of yourself you abandoned because you thought it wasn't impressive enough. That grief is real, and it's evidence that you're finally starting to see the cost of what you've been doing. You've spent so many years believing that if you just worked harder, achieved more, became better, you'd finally feel worthy. That someday you'd cross some invisible threshold and the voice would finally say, okay, now you're enough. But here's the quiet truth. That day will never come. Not because you're failing, but because you're chasing something that was never real. You were always enough, from the very beginning, before the achievements, before the effort, before you learned to measure your worth in accomplishments and approval. You were enough when you were small and messy and learning. You were enough when you failed. You were enough on the days you did nothing at all. And you're enough now, not because of what you've done, but because you exist, because you're here, because your worth was never something you needed to earn. So the next time that voice whispers, not yet, not quite, not good enough, pause, take a breath, and remind yourself, I am not a problem to be solved. I am a person learning to be human, and that is enough. You don't have to be extraordinary to be worthy. You don't have to be perfect to be loved. You don't have to prove anything to deserve peace. You were always enough, you just forgot. But you can remember now. Start there. That's where you finally get to rest.